Hey, welcome everyone, fourth edition of the 2025 interview series. Uh, Members and followers will know of Dominic Frisby, our guest today, via our recommended reading pages, where we regularly endorse the Flying Frisby Substack channel, which is an excellent source of investment ideas, economic history, and shrewd portfolio advice. So it's an absolute true honour today to have you here, Dominic.
Well, thank you very much, Jimmy, and thank you for having me. And your viewers and listeners won't know this, but we've had a chaotic start to this interview because my flight last night was delayed, and as a result, I got in very late and then overslept, and so my morning has been chaotic. But hopefully, we're there now.
All good. So, look, Dominic has been Money Week's main commentator on gold, mining, Bitcoin, and Forex for 20 years now. He's also written 4 books, being Life After the State, Why We Don't Need Government, Bitcoin, The Future of Money, Daylight Robbery, How Tax Shaped Our Past and Will Change Our Future. And then coming up this week, I understand, a new book, The Secret History of Gold. When's that coming out, Dominic?
Well, it comes out in the UK on Thursday, and it comes out in Australia soon, but I don't think on Thursday because because of the travel time getting the books getting the books to Australia. But it comes out imminently in Australia.
Okay. Well, in addition
They print them here and then ship them over. You'd think they'd print them over there, but they don't.
Yeah. Okay. So, in addition to being an author, Substack channel writer, he's also a stand-up comedian, with his specialty being comic songs. And I was just having a look on YouTube just before. You've got, I think, over 50,000 subscribers to that channel. So certainly the creative side of things is going well as well.
Yeah, it's going okay.
So look, Dominic is a believer in low taxes and individual responsibility. Has been a good thing. That government is usually the problem, not the solution, and that fiat money is at the root of the West's decline. That philosophy underpins most of his investing themes and his writings that come through the Substack. Dominic also includes the odd article about health, and I remember recently reading a very excellent article on staying fit in middle age and really turning the way your body's functioning around. Focused on the dangers of processed food and seed oils. And I've really taken that one to heart, Dominic. That was a very good one.
Yeah, funnily enough, I mean, you couldn't call me a health guru or anything like that. I'm just sort of accumulating things I read online. But of all the articles I ever wrote, I think the one that led to the most converts was one of the health thing, how I lost, I lost a lot of weight,
Mm.
more than 20 kilos at one point. And that one got the most converts of anything I ever wrote. When I say converts, I mean from an unpaid to a paying subscriber.
Gotcha. So look, overall, Dominic says his aim is to make his subscribers happier, healthier, wiser, and wealthier. So I think that's squarely in line with Melbourne Investing Club and why the members, the students, young professionals are involved. So it's great to have you along, Dominic. Now,
Thank you very much, Jimmy.
A couple of quick fire questions. So just to, some quick ones here. Favorite cuisine for dining out?
Italian. I love Italian food. I'm slightly biased because I had an Italian great grandparent and I used to live in Italy and I speak Italian, but I love Italian food. Like everything you ever need in your food, you can find in Italy in some way or other.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, I know you go to a lot of events. So favorite city to visit for an investing or financial related sort of event?
Oh my goodness me. I've been to a few, but it would what would be my well, I love the European cities, but they're not what they were.
Mm.
I guess somewhere I'm supposed to be going out to Brisbane, but they seem to have mucked it up. But I haven't actually been to Brisbane, but I think I'd say I went to Prague earlier in the year, and I loved Prague. But
Mm.
I'm going to say one of the American cities. I don't know
Mm.
which one, but one of the American cities, because America's such fun.
Okay, well, Brisbane you'll really
No, I
enjoy.
know what I'm going to say. Buenos Aires. I went to Buenos
Fantastic.
Aires last November, and that was absolutely astonishing. It blew me away more than any other city I've ever been to. Buenos Aires.
Well, I think you'll, if you do get to Brisbane, you'll like it. It's a very fast-growing city. That's the city in Australia that has the fastest underlying housing growth, and that's really a favourite for the Asian immigration because you've got a good climate and good work prospects. It's a good nexus there. Okay, now I know you go to a lot of music, comedy events as well. I think you normally go to the Edinburgh Fringe, but I think you weren't able to go this year. Do you have a favourite destination for that sort of event? A comedy one or a music one?
Well, actually, I do Edinburgh every year, but I probably don't go down as well in Edinburgh as I do elsewhere because there's a lot of people who don't share my worldview amongst the Edinburgh Fringe audiences. But I love doing shows in London. I'd like to do more in America. So, favorite destination to do shows? I don't know. I'll say London.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, right. So you've got a real confluence of interests. Once people, get on your Substack, have a look at your podcasts that you've done, you'll see that you've interviewed about gold, cryptocurrency, fund management, music, etc. So I guess the first question I have is, looking back, did you envisage your career would be like this? Did you sort of aspire to get in a situation where you're running your own business and you've got flexibility over your time to sort of fully explore all your interests? Were you always looking
No,
to set yourself up like that?
everything that's happened is completely accidental, and it's just a accumulated series of errors and bad decisions. And it's not what I planned. I didn't really have anything planned. I always used to struggle to what's the word? Project, imagine my future when I was a student. But so much of what happens is just a series of accumulated accidents.
Hmm. The
I do think it's good to visualize your future, by the way, but I always struggled to.
Gotcha. The I was really struck by a comment you made recently about people in their. I think a friend of yours was in his early 50s, and you made a comment to him that, you know what, you might not even be halfway through yet because many people nowadays, and especially if you're healthy and love your work, will end up keeping working well, perhaps well into your 80s. And I guess it was, I thought it was a very insightful comment because do you sort of see that as being the future of work, that where we need to go? We need to become less reliant on salary earnings, more entrepreneurial, and be prepared to work longer. Is that the way you sort of see it heading?
Well, different working habits and different lifestyles suit different people. So some people are suited to running their own business. Some people are suited to being freelancers. Some people are suited to being salaried. And different people have different mindsets, different characters, and so different things suit you. But it's definitely the case that pensions, as they currently stand, you would retire at 65, and
Mm.
then you would die when you're 70. And so, whoever was paying your pension only had 5 years of liability. But
Mm.
now it's often the case that people seem to be, particularly in public sector jobs, they seem to be retiring at 55, having done 30 years service or something. And then they have 40 years of benevolent pension payments. And
Mm.
it's just, that's totally imbalanced. Now, my dad was a writer, so effectively he was a freelancer, and he died when he was 88, and he was hustling right up to within 1 or 2 months of when he died. He never stopped hustling, never stopped writing, never stopped trying to market what he'd written. And I know that I'm of a similar constitution, makeup, whatever, to my dad, similar mindset, and so I just know that I'll never stop hustling. And I was talking to a friend a couple of years ago now, but we were both in our early 50s, and I didn't really start working until maybe, by the time I'd finished university and then wandered about from this to that, the other, I didn't really get going till maybe I was 24 or 25. And so that would be from 24, 25 till say 55 is 30 years. And then you go from 55 to 85. Well, that's another 30 years. So I'm
Mm.
55 now. I'm only halfway through my
Yeah.
working career. Now, obviously, I'm gonna, as I get older, I might not have the energy that I had when I was younger, but in fact, my energy levels are very high.
Mm,
And but what I will have in the next 30 years that I didn't have is wisdom and experience
mm,
accumulated over 30 years of mistakes. And I think there's a thing, men in their early 50s make their best investment decisions they make over the course of their life. It's sort of the
mm,
time when the cognitive thing is still there just about, but it's got the benefit of the wisdom. And then as they go into their 60s, they become easier to rip off because they've got the arrogance that comes and the confidence that comes of having been successful and done something with your life, coupled
mm,
with a slight cognitive decline, and that's a bad mix. And so you're vulnerable to
mm,
scams and things when you're a bit older. But anyway, in any case, so when you're in your early 50s, and more of us are,
mm,
the nature of work is changing. There's more and more of us are going to become freelancers, gig economy, side hustles, all the rest of it. Partly because the main salary doesn't get you everything you want, but partly because the gig economy is just growing. Freelancer is the fastest growing workforce in the world. Digital nomad is the fastest growing
mm,
workforce within the freelance thing. COVID kind of normalized remote working and side hustles and all of that. So you put all this together, and yeah, I just think even when most men retire, they get bored pretty quick, or women as well. They
mm,
get bored pretty quickly and just need something to do. And so
mm,
yeah, I think we'll be working until much later in life, and
mm,
I think that's a good thing. So yeah, when you're in your early 50s, in terms of your working life, you're only halfway through
mm.
in your early 50s. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other point that really occurred to me is I mean, you add in AI as well to that mix, and then which is obviously going to eat away at a lot of the sort of menial tasks. And then I think, if, especially in the West, if you sort of take into account the fact that our economies aren't really growing, maybe apart from the US, right? So all those jobs which are really just a function of the growth in the economy, like accountants and things like that, they're not the meal tickets they once were. And so, I really think, think about the members of our club. I really encourage them. You can't be expecting that you're going to get a job at KPMG and you're going to work there 30 or 40 years and then you'll retire happy. I just don't think that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, that sort of career sort of came about after the Industrial Revolution and going into the 20th century. My uncle, for example, worked for
Mm,
BP, British Petroleum, for like 40 or 50 years, and that was his life. And
mm,
I think that kind of thing where you work in one place for one company for your whole life, that's
mm,
going to be a lot rarer than it was. It's not dead, and I don't think AI. It's quite interesting if you look at Canterbury
mm,
Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, written in I forget if it was the 13th or the 14th century, but there are 30 pilgrims walking from London to Canterbury, and each of them has a different job. And I think of the 30 pilgrims, 26 of those jobs still exist. Obviously,
yeah,
the nature of those jobs has changed, but the jobs still exist. So, you know, there will still be accountants. Accountancy is one of the world's oldest professions. There were people counting
mm,
accounting for things in ancient Mesopotamia, but the nature of accountancy will change. And yeah, of course, I mean, we've been using computers to take the heavy lifting out of accounting since the invention of Excel, but
mm,
AI is only going to accelerate that.
mm. So just thinking about investing for a second, and a lot of the members will be interested in your takes on things. Your advice to subscribers is the Dolce Far Niente port. You could be able to say it much better than me, portfolio. And really, I think I understand the translation is the do nothing portfolio,
Yeah.
where you basically have a very strategic allocation to asset classes. I guess, we can't give it all away. We need people to subscribe to get the full commentary.
Yeah.
But what led you to this broad mix? And is it how you've managed your money?
Well, I advocate it as a starting point, and as a starting point, we have 5% allocation to Bitcoin, 15% allocation to gold. And the idea of this portfolio is because I write about a lot of kind of racy mining stocks, and sometimes racy mining stocks, particularly if you're not in a mining bull market, can go pear-shaped. I wanted something. I said, just put 10% of your portfolio in special situations, racy stuff, and the other 90% should be dolce far niente that you don't touch. and you just leave it. And obviously, you might do some asset allocation maybe once or twice a year. We had some uranium in there, and we reduced that, for example. But on the whole, we haven't touched it. And I say start off as 5% to Bitcoin. What will inevitably happen, because it's the way of Bitcoin? Bitcoin will, I mean, it's almost 50% of mine now, but it will, just because it outperforms other assets, it will grow to be a bigger part. And so you could just say just own Bitcoin and forget everything else. But the higher Bitcoin goes, the more money has to come into Bitcoin to make it go higher. So it's not that easy. But we have, so as I say, we start 5% Bitcoin, 15% gold. I forget the allocation to equities, but we have an equity allocation that's sort of spread around the world, but overweight the US, because the US is where it's all at. And we have a starting point, 20% in wealth preservation, bonds and that kind of thing. But that's just got much smaller because bonds have been crap. But, you'll be glad of your wealth preservation, for example, in April, when everything was going tits up because of the tariffs, the wealth preservation started to look very attractive. And then we have 10% in, fun, speculative, special situations. And so that's roughly how it looks. But at the moment, I just think all roads lead to gold and Bitcoin, and you want to own plenty of both.
The US, and I know, just geopolitics for a second here. I think you said, the US is really where the action is of the Western economies, and so you're overweight to the S&P. Are you still bullish USA? And what's your thinking on the Trump's economic reforms over there? Do you think you think ultimately it's going to be a success, and there's a couple more good years ahead?
Yeah, well, Trump marks himself on the S&P, so he's going to make sure the S&P does well. I mean, you can't guarantee that, obviously, even if you're the president, but that's his marks. And the first year is usually the weakest year, and and it's been pretty strong, albeit volatile. And America's the biggest economy in the world. It's just where all the growth is. It's where all the tech is. I just think everyone should have an allocation to America. Obviously, people get caught up in all the political arguments, and I just think, I'm very political, and I have political bias all across my investing, but really the best investors are just apolitical and don't try not to even think about it, and just get over that, because it doesn't help you.
Gotcha. I agree. I think he is very focused on the S&P, and he mentions it all the time. So I think he'll be laser focused on sort of helping those big US companies ensure that their stock prices remain very robust. Right, now let's talk about the book. So, The Secret History of Gold. It's a very interesting time for the concept of money. We're seeing these rising debt levels in the Western countries. There's surely going to be inevitable currency deterioration. We've seen the rise of cryptocurrency. But however, as you say, we've seen actually a renaissance in gold investing. So what sort of prompted you to write this book and do it now?
Well, I've always known a great deal about gold, and my first book, Life After the State, was basically a libertarian manifesto why we need less government, and then that led to a book about Bitcoin, because I was talking about the importance of independence money, and then I wrote a book about tax, and just gold was the next logical thing for me to write about, because it was just an easy book to write, really, and the fact that it's coincided with this bull market is very helpful. It's not just a book about how to invest in gold and why I think gold's going higher. There's a lot about the history of gold. It's an amazing metal, about the qualities, about gold in our mythology, gold in history, what gold can do to people, and not always a good thing. And yeah, hopefully it's an entertaining read about a very interesting subject. But so yeah, that's kind of what wrote me. What led me to write about it, but it was basically the next logical thing.
A lot of people say, does Bitcoin or your cryptocurrency replace gold as your sort of strategic hedge, if you know what I mean. I think one of your quotes is, put 5% in gold and then hope it doesn't grow, because obviously it's contrarian, to markets. Do you sort of see it that way with Bitcoin versus gold, that they're sort of competitors in a sense?
Well, they are competitors, and a lot of the speculative capital that once upon a time would have gone into gold miners, I now think goes into cryptocurrencies. So
Mm,
that's hurt gold miners. Um,
mm,
the They are competitors, and there's going to be a big showdown between the two,
mm,
maybe 3 or 4 years from now. As you know, there's this deliberate thing where um, Trump, Vance, and Bessent are managing the decline of the US dollar as an international reserve asset, and they're moving towards the adoption of neutral
mm,
monies, because by having the US dollar as the global reserve asset, it makes trade deficits inevitable with the rest of the world, and they're trying to stop that because they're trying to reshore manufacturing. So that the price they're going to pay for that is a reduction in the role of the US dollar as the global reserve currency, and at the moment there's no other national currency that competes, so it's going to be gold and Bitcoin to fight it out. And either, China and the US both own loads of gold, so it suits both that gold plays that role. And but it also there's probably a lot of Bitcoin in China. We don't really know, but it used to be the home of Bitcoin mining. But
mm,
there's certainly a lot of Bitcoin in the US at the national level, at the corporate level, at the private level.
mm,
But the essential difference between gold and Bitcoin is, while they're both alternative currencies and they both have a role as store of value and to an extent as medium of exchange, although less so gold, the 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 gold is a physical asset. It's an analog asset, and so all the benefits of a physical analog asset come with gold. It's a thing, you can see it, you can hold it. It doesn't change. It's, all the gold that's in the world has never been is still exists. You can't destroy it. So, there's loads of benefits to gold for it being a physical asset. But for example, 2 or 3 years ago, Russia bought a load of drones off Iran, and it to use in the war in Ukraine, and it paid for them in gold, and it had to fly 3 tons of gold from Russia to Ukraine to Iran, which is just totally impractical.
mm,
Every time you got to stick tons of gold on a plane. I mean, goodness me. So there are benefits to the fact that you can't destroy gold and it stays there forever, but the fact that it's a physical asset also places limitations on it and makes it vulnerable. You've got to store it safely. Whereas Bitcoin is a digital asset, and there are all sorts of benefits to digital assets. You can send a digital asset anywhere. It has all the it's why we use digital money now instead of cash. It's why we use Word documents instead of paper. There's just digital assets are very practical, but at the same time you can't hold them, you can't see them. So there are limitations on digital, but there are also benefits to digital. And we're going to sort of see this showdown between, and it's important to remember, gold is physical and Bitcoin is digital. And I'm not one of these people that says uh, one is better than the other. They both have their advantages and their disadvantages, and but once you have it clear, and I'm a big believer that you should own both, because they're
mm,
both going to have a very strategic role to play. And when the big showdown comes in, say, 2 or 3 years, in all probability, the convenience of digital will win out in the short term. But in the very long term, somebody's going to come along and invent something that's better than digital technology, and at which point Bitcoin becomes redundant, but gold will still be there. So, and gold will be there long after human beings have disappeared from the planet. The gold will still be there. So, um, you know, they both have their advantages and their disadvantages, and that's why I advocate don't take sides, own both.
mm. There's a lot in the book. I understand there's a lot of good anecdotes, and I know you've been releasing a few of them, or a few of the ones that didn't make the cut. I think there was a great story about in World War II how Winston Churchill sent the British gold over to Canada, and went through the gauntlet of the U-boats. Is that sort of part of the book, I presume, Dominic? There are a lot of good anecdotes about how gold's been used in the past and things like this.
Yeah, there's so many good stories from history, and the particularly in World War II, and Nazis, and everyone's obsessed with the Nazis and where's the Nazi gold and all of that, and the it was just so big. But at one point, that chapter was like half the book, and so
Yeah.
I had to trim it down. So we had to take the guillotine to a lot of the stories, but I got the stories, so I just put them out as blogs and things because they're great little stories. But yeah, everyone's obsessed with where's the Nazi gold. A lot of it's in Argentina, but anyway.
Okay, now I've got a question. This is from one of our members when I put it out. I was chatting to you today. He's also from the UK, from Brighton actually, and he said to me, he asked me this curly question. He said, "Look, is there a cap on? Should we think that there's a cap on the price of gold in the sense that can the total price versus the quantity of gold basically only ever be equal to the amount of fiat money in the world?" And could you say the same about Bitcoin? Is that sort of the way you think about it? That there's ultimately a cap based on the value of everything else.
I guess so. I guess there is a cap, but then the value of everything else is going to increase, particularly as the purchasing power of fiat money declines.
Mm,
But there will always be the value of everything will always be greater than the amount of actual money in circulation
mm,
because the same money that you pay X with, X will pay Y with, and Y will pay Z with. So the value of everything will always exceed the actual amount of money in circulation. That's kind of one of Adam Smith's um,
mm,
arguments.
mm,
But I don't get too hung up on those. Bitcoin is the ultimate money, and the ultimate value of everything in the world is whatever it is, 300 trillion. I can't remember the number,
mm.
and therefore the value of Bitcoin will become 300 trillion. I those kind of discussions are nice when you're having little fantasies, but um, if Bitcoin can get to 200 grand this year or next year, then I think we should take that as a big win.
So I guess that leads on to another question I had is, a lot of people feel as if, maybe we've missed the run on gold. It's had a good run. Obviously, Bitcoin's had a great run. Do you think we're too late to the party?
No,
Mm,
I don't think you're too late to the party in either. And the amount the world is, there are more people who've looked at Bitcoin and gone, oh, it's doubled, I'm too late to buy it. And they've been saying
mm,
that since 2014. And it
yeah.
just goes on and on and on. And at a certain point, when you're buying Bitcoin, you always feel like you're paying too much for it. And you just have
Mm,
to get over it, get
mm,
over yourself. Bitcoin is a technologically brilliant form of money. And you go to a Bitcoin conference and everyone is so clever and the people who work in Bitcoin, they're just the combined IQ of the space is just phenomenal, and by investing in it, you are basically in benefiting from the combined IQ of the Bitcoin space.
mm.
And so,
I
go on, and then and with gold, you'll get kind of getting nature's IQ, I suppose. But
uh,
yeah, I know gold's gone up a lot, but it's the bull market is not over.
I think one of the key things actually is to understand the role of Bitcoin. You need to understand gold and vice versa in a way, and also and you need to understand these two things as well to understand the risk of fiat money and your wealth being denominated in particular currencies. So I think that's been the key thing that I've got actually through reading about Bitcoin, reading about gold, this
I
sort
would
of
agree
thing.
with that. I would agree with that. You need to understand that your global money supply is currently at 7%. They
Mm,
say that inflation's 3 or 4%, whatever it is, but global money supply is at 7%, which is double what so that is actually what inflation is. And
mm,
so the money supply is going to increase by 7% every year, which means that whatever you want to buy is there's going to be 7% more money chasing that particular thing. It's obviously going to be worse in markets where there's debt in the market because more money supply goes into debt-based assets like houses and cars, which we use finance to buy, and tuition and so on. but 7% is your benchmark. And
Mm,
if the same amount of money is chasing more goods, then the price of those goods is going to come down. But if
mm,
more money is chasing fewer goods, then the price of those things is going to go up, and that is the dynamic that's going to happen. So yeah, your fiat money is going to, like, especially as governments can't are struggling to tax more, but they can't keep their spending in check. They're going to The way they're going to get around that is by debasing currency. It
mm.
is inevitable.
Okay. Two more questions. The first one is important because if you come into Australia, you'll know that Australians love their mining stocks.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people have ridden the lithium boom and bust over here. Maybe it's coming back. A lot of people are big uranium supporters as well. Do you follow the Australian miners closely, and have you got any favourites?
I'm sorry to say that I don't. I've invested in a couple of Australian mining companies over the years, and more fool me, I follow Canada, and I think it's literally because I've got a broker in Canada and because the hours suit me better.
Mm,
But but you know, because following Australian stocks means I need to get up early in the morning, whereas following Canadian stocks means I can do it into the early evening, if that
mm,
makes sense. But
mm,
Canada's been pretty crap. And I mean, it's been better this year, but on the whole, Canada's been pretty crap. And Australia generally has been a lot better. And, there's numerous Australian companies which I wish I'd invested in, and I just didn't because, yeah, literally because of the hours. And it's just not a, and also, like, my broker is not very good at buying Australian stocks.
mm,
So more fool me. But yeah, you have a rich mining culture and all the things that come with mining, the excitement, the pain, the wealth, the poverty. You know, um, it's yeah. I mean, mining is the country's built on the back of mining.
mm. Okay. Last question. Now, we've got a lot of young people who are watching this. A lot of them in the early 20s here in Melbourne. What advice would you give in terms of study choices? What sort of subjects any subjects that you'd think are good to be knowledgeable about for the future, or any early career choices they might make in terms of where they go and work? Any
Well,
thoughts?
I find it very hard to read books these days because of I think phones have done something to my concentration.
Mm,
So I would try and find a way of using your phone less, limiting your phone use. And, reading books is good, even if it's just audio books. But I would listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books and just educate yourself. And in terms of where you place yourself, you've got to do something you find fun and interesting because you'll just do it that much better if you find it fun and interesting. And pick pick a sector, try and pick a sector that's growing, that's comparatively unregulated, because regulation blocks progress. There's a scalability to digital things that doesn't exist in physical markets. So the digital world is often a good place to go. But the main thing is to do things that you find fun and interesting. When you're when you have a decision about what to do, say one evening or something, and you got, shall I stay in and watch Netflix or shall I go and meet this person?
mm,
Always, and you're not sure what to do, always the decision you make, always try and make the decision that enables the most luck to come into your life.
mm,
And, shall I get, I need to get to this destination. I'm in no particular hurry. Shall I get the bus or shall I hitchhike? Well, if you hitchhike, that just there's the you open up so many possibilities to come into your life. You know, and you don't need to be in this place. Why not hitchhike?
mm,
Because you'll just have a much more interesting experience than getting the bus. So, that kind of thing. And if you treat your life like that, and you know, don't whoever you meet, you know, the value of networks and personal contacts is extraordinarily enormous. And don't just judge people because he's got a stupid shirt on, or because he's got a hairy nose or something. It might be that guy with the stupid shirt or the hairy nose is Satoshi Nakamoto. People surprise you in all sorts of unexpected ways, and so don't judge people and build up networks and allow luck to come into your life.
Okay, well, I think that's fantastic advice, Dominic, and people will love it. I think so. The key thing is how do people find you? The Flying Frisbee on Substack. We've got the book coming out. Anywhere else?
Yeah, the flyingfrisbee.com, FRISBY, theflyingfrisbee.com is my Substack, and that's kind of my main hustle, if you like. And if you're a Twittery person, at Dominic Frisby.
Okay, fantastic. And look, if you come to Melbourne when you're in Australia, we can do a great Italian lunch at a restaurant called Il Duca, which is on Wellington Parade. We'll get a whole bunch of us there.
It sounds like it's run by Italian immigrants, so I'd love that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Dominic. Appreciate it.
All right. Cheers then. Bye.
Thank you.